This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pm-podcast.com or send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com. Hello and welcome to episode number 147. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast. Nice to have you with us. Here's a question that I have received from quite a number of podcast listeners in the past few years. How do I overcome the catch-22 situation of getting into project management? The problem is that in order to get assigned your first project, you need to have experience as a project manager. And in order to get some experience as a project manager, you first need to have your first project assigned. Is there a way to get around this? This and many other questions about how someone who is interested in becoming a project manager can get started in our profession are at the center of my discussion today with Josh Nankivil from mypmstudent.com. You will hear how both he and I started our career as project managers, what books to read, what training to get, and what websites are a great place to start. But let me give you a possible answer right here for this catch-22 question. Anything that you work on in your job can be managed through proper project management principles. So don't wait until someone assigns you a project. The next time your boss gives you an assignment, go ahead and begin managing it by applying solid project management principles. Not every assignment has obviously the same needs, so maybe on one assignment, you're able to use a project schedule, and on the next you can keep an issues log, and on the third you can do some rudimentary risk management. The trick is to understand what is needed and apply the right tools and techniques. And now, the interview. My interview guest is Josh Nankivil, the man behind PM Student and PM Student e-learning, which you can find at mypmstudent.com. His short biography on Twitter is helping new and aspiring project managers to reach their career goals, including gaining experience, education, PMP certification, and more. Josh brings an entrepreneurial spirit to any project with a background in technology and specific strengths in management, process engineering, and organizational improvement. He has extensive experience in managing projects in the aerospace industry, as you will hear soon. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview.
Today with Josh Nankivil from PM Student. Hello, Josh, and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
Great to be here, Cornelius.
We want to help junior project managers in this interview to get started in project management, in particular how to get training. But let's start somewhere completely different to begin here. Because the catch-22 for many folks who want to get into project management is that, in order to get assigned a project, you need to have experience as a project manager. But they won't give you a project unless you have that experience. So it's really this catch-22. You need it to have it, and in order to have it, you need it. How do you overcome this conundrum?
Yeah, well, I get a lot of questions about that, Cornelius, and really, what it's about is creating your own opportunities. So volunteering is one of the big things that I've done in my career. So part of that is not, when I say volunteering, I don't just mean volunteering for, charities or other organizations, but even within your own company, branching out within your own role and taking on some additional responsibilities that will start, being able to get you exposed to project management in your organization is a great way to do that. So you can also do it for organizations that you may already be involved with in your community. So civic organizations or your church or, whatever, things like that. There's also a lot of project management organizations such as, local PMI chapters and those types of things. So if you ask about opportunities there, there are definitely opportunities in there. And then, the other thing about approaching organizations that I would say is don't necessarily go at it and say, hey, do you have any volunteer organizations or opportunities? Although that's a good question, really the best way that I've found is to go ahead and find something that you can contribute to the organization and put together a little proposal for what that would look like and submit it to the board. And that's exactly how I did a project for the students of PM SIG for PMI. I took a look at their website. I didn't like it, and so I put together a proposal for how we would go about implementing a project to redesign the website. And not only that, but also for me to be able to include members of the organization in this project. And we kind of had this structure that I set up where I would start off as the project manager and kind of put everything together. And then every month we would switch off who was the acting project manager. So it was kind of an opportunity for people within the organization to get some experience managing a project as well. And it was a virtual environment with volunteers, which is always more difficult than, if you have somebody reporting to you. So the other thing that I'd say, if you're doing physical, if you're volunteering in your community in some way, shape, or form, organizing events is a great way to get this experience, because when you do organize some type of a fundraising event or whatever it is, you're going to have a lot of people, logistics, a lot of different things to juggle. And so you can really put some of those skills into practice.
Yeah. Let me make a couple of comments to what you've just said. Let's begin with opportunity. Because I spoke to Tom Mokel from 10-Step recently. We talked about how do you move from being a senior project manager into program management. And he basically said the same thing as you said. He said, the first thing you need is opportunity. You can't sit here as a project manager and expect somebody to call you up and say, hey, I want to make you a program manager. And similarly, when you start out as a junior project manager, or as someone who wants to get into project management, you can't just sit there and hope, well, one of these days someone's going to notice what I can offer and they will give me a project management position. You have to make your own opportunities. If that means, taking a radical step and, quitting your job and going to a new company and letting them employ you as a junior project manager, or finding a department within your current organization where they do a lot of projects and you can get involved, well, then take that step. Create your own opportunities.
Absolutely.
And second, go ahead.
I was just going to add to your statements about finding a role where you can grow as a project manager, because when you're looking, if you're looking to look at a different organization than the one that you're in, some questions that you might ask yourself about the organization is, how do they make their money? First of all, do they make their money by running projects? Because if they do, and they've been in business for a while, it's probably a pretty good bet that they're placing some value on formal project management. And then even if they're not making their money specifically from doing projects, there's also evidence that they value formal PM that you can look for. And some of that is in terms of the job descriptions that are given. If you take a look at the job descriptions and kind of match the title to the description, does it seem like that's a good fit? Or are they posting something as, a business analyst or something like that? When you read the description, it's really a project management position. So, you can be a team member on a project and work your way into project management from that angle, or being a lead. There's also, if you look for titles like project or business analyst, project coordinator, project controller, project scheduler, project assistant, junior project manager, those are some things to look for as well.
Yeah. The second comment I was going to make to your opening statement is the one, volunteer in your local either PMI chapter or whatever professional organization you have. As a former chapter president, I can tell you that somebody who comes up to me and gives me a proposal and tells me, here, I have an idea how I can make the chapter better, is something that would blow me away, because that happens so rarely. So having somebody who doesn't just come up to you and say, hi, I'm here, I want to help, versus, hi, I'm here, I'd like to help, and this is how I think I can contribute. This is my idea on how to move our organization forward much, much better. And I can almost guarantee that you're going to get the job, unless, it runs contradictory to the strategic plans that the Board of Governors has for the chapter at the moment. You mentioned finding a company that does projects professionally. Might be a good place to get started to find your first project. That's in fact how I happened to get my first projects. I was working as a software developer in a paper mill, and I was given, small software development tasks, and they became bigger and bigger projects, and I moved on from there, and I found myself a consulting company where I worked, and I was again handed both projects and software development tasks. And from there, I kind of grew into managing these projects. How did you personally get assigned your first real project?
Oh, this was a while
Long
ago.
time ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, same with me.
So I was a technical trainer for a PC company. This was back in 1999, I believe it was, and at least it seems like a long time ago. The training manager in my department was promoted, and he approached me. I volunteered to take over ownership of an operational process from him that he was in charge of, and it was essentially a call flow. So kind of mapping the process for the call flow, and this went into the training of the new hires and that kind of thing. So it was kind of a standardized process. And so I took it over. I volunteered for it. I said, yes, I'd be glad to do that. And my first question when I looked at it is, who is this thing for? Because it had kind of been sitting there for a while. It's kind of one of those back burner things that happen in companies where, yes, I own this thing, but I haven't really touched it for a year type of thing.
Yes.
So I took a look at it and I said, who is this for? And I found, discovered that this is really for the technicians that are out there on the floor. And so after looking at that, I took a look at it, and it was this big, thick stack of pages that nobody read, right? So I went and talked to some of the technicians on the floor and said, hey, you know about this thing, do you use it? Anything like that? They're like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. I think they trained us on that when I got hired 2 years ago, but I haven't seen it since then. So it really wasn't something that was being utilized at all. And it really should have been a resource for the technicians out there. So another problem was that we had 4 different sites, and each site had their own process. So they had started off being the same process originally, I think, and then they kind of diverged from there. And it was really kind of the training department kind of going off on their own and making the process the way that they thought it should go. So I essentially took it and said, we need to, first of all, get this thing online, because it was this big, thick stack of papers that nobody's going to read through. And the other thing that we need to do is bridge the gap between our sites and collaborate with them on getting something that's consistent. So I, reached out to the other training managers at the other 3 sites, and we got together. We did some weekly calls. We did some focus groups with technicians. We did a lot of collaboration, and I was kind of organizing this whole effort. And then we implemented it. We got it programmed and put into a web application and got it rolled out. Now, I had no idea, Cornelius, at this time that what I was doing was a project. But looking back at it, that's exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't really handed to me in terms of, hey, here,
here's a charter.
Take over this project.
Yeah.
It was more like, here's this thing. And I looked at it and said, wow, this really needs to be improved. And that was kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah, it was the same with me. You just get handed something that just grows into a real project. My something was, my boss came into my office and said, Cornelius, I don't even recall his name, has some program that he wants to have developed. Please go talk to him. 18 months later, I was finally finished. Right? So this small statement from my boss turned into 1.5 years of my life running my first project.
Yeah, it's actually funny because this was a project all in by itself. But then after we were done, it started to get some attention from the vice president of customer care, which mm-hmm. is we were reported up to. And he ended up saying, this is a really beneficial thing. We should take it a little bit further. And that launched into another project where we developed this even further and started putting troubleshooting guides and things like that into the tool as well. And I was on that project too.
Yeah. So it's the opportunities that you again create for yourself by running a project, your first project, and making it good and making sure that people know that you've done something good here. And I think what in both cases happened to you and me here is you're just suddenly handed the role of the project manager without, maybe not even without being told you're the project manager. You kind of take over. And in that regard, Buster Barr, a colleague of both of us, he wrote the book, Surprise, Now You Are a Software Project Manager. I guess that's what happens to many people out there. How do you deal with this situation where you're suddenly given a software development project? Here, do it.
Well, I think one of the first things to realize there, because I've been in this type of situation before, is to not be afraid to ask for help, because a lot of people, when they take on a role like this, whether it's your formal job, or I've had a lot of, acting roles where the word acting was in front of my title for quite a while, you're not really expected to be an expert at something like this when it gets thrown in your lap. So just realize that. Don't go around pretending like you know things that you don't actually know. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the first piece of advice that I would give. And then the second thing is to, again, view it as an opportunity for growth. So looking back at our experiences, Cornelius, if I would have said, at that time I was actually an acting training manager too, right? Because I was just a trainer, and then I got not really promoted, but I was the acting trainer, so no pay raise or anything like that, but more responsibility. So I could have said, I really have enough on my plate already. I really don't want to do this. But because I viewed it as an opportunity to learn more, I wasn't even looking at project management at that point. So just by viewing it as an opportunity for growth instead of, oh, geez, I have to do this now, That's really the way to look at it. Because if you do get something put on you and you view it as, geez, I got this thing dumped on my lap, what am I going to do now? Then you're really not going to be in the right mindset to address it.
Yeah. And I guess another obvious answer to this particular question is get Buster Barr's book and go through it. Yeah, it's
definitely
called Surprise, Now You Are a Software Project Manager by Buster Barr. Next to Buster's book, what are some of the other websites that you would recommend where junior project managers can find help in order to get started?
Well, there are some blogs that I really like that kind of talk to this. And one is a blog by Soma. I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Yeah, neither do I.
But it's steppingintopm.com. And she's her blog is kind of like mine at PM Student, where she's focusing on talking about things that are relevant to people who are getting started in project management. So she's kind of sharing her experiences as she learns more. She's interviewing people. She's doing some great stuff over there. Another one is cottagepm.com. Mm-hmm. And this is Max Walker, who I've talked to quite a bit. And he's got some great stuff on small-scale project management. I think this is particularly relevant for junior PMs or new project managers, because the natural progression is going to be that you're going to start out with small-scale projects, maybe just a few people on your team. The complexity and the length duration is going to be pretty small in the beginning. So being able to take all of the processes that are part of, a huge multi-year mission in aerospace or defense or something like that, and scale those down into a way that makes sense for a smaller project is a really important thing. And I know that when I first started getting interested in formal project management and I started going out and doing a lot of reading and research, I found these, I read entire books on earned value management and all this kind of stuff that was just, really, really heavy and complex. And it just didn't match up to the type of small project environment that I was in. So that's a good one as well. There's, of course, my blog, pmstudent.com.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because we definitely want to make sure that our listeners know that pmstudent.com is where you publish information for junior project managers, right?
Right, exactly. So it started out as a blog, and it's really just a way for me to teach and to share my experiences with the people who are brand new to project management. So that's really who I focus on. So it started out as a blog. Since then, I've added newsletters. Now I'm doing video and podcasts and training and things like that as well. So that's really the focus for it.
Yeah, and your latest effort on PM Student is the e-learning, right?
Yep.
And people can find the e-learning at mypmstudent.com. And just a disclaimer here, mypmstudent.com, that is my affiliate link. So if you go to mypmstudent.com and you decide to take Josh's training and you purchase his training, then I will get a commission from this. So what is behind the PM Student e-learning?
Really, what it is over the years, I've gotten a lot of questions from people who are getting started in project management, and I was always a little bit frustrated because I couldn't really go into the depth that I wanted to. So you get a question from someone that has a question like, how do you determine what your scope should be on a project, and how do you control it? So it's like a one sentence statement, and I'm like, I could teach an entire course about that, the answer to that question. So that's kind of essentially how PM Student e-learning came about. Is I had a lot of requests for people to go into more detail, more depth, or I was getting questions like that really require a fairly long and well thought out answer in order to do. So the way that I approach it is not so much like a teaching lecture type thing, but more of a mentoring approach. So there's a lot of screen sharing where I'll record my computer screen as I'm walking through things and trying to really talk to the person who's listening as if you're sitting next to me. So I essentially pretend that we're coworkers at the same organization, and I'm a more experienced project manager and you're a junior project manager or someone in that type of role who's come to me and said, I'm really interested in this. Is there anything that I can do to help you out? What can you show me? What lessons learned can you share with me? And that's the type of approach that I'm taking to it. And then the other side of that is creating a community within that group. So the members are part of a community where we get to ask each other questions, and we have an accountability room where if people have a goal, a career goal, PMP certification, or I want to be in this type of role within 6 months. Those types of things we can post those things into the community forums and hold each other accountable for them, and that's been a really positive aspect of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other junior project management type training websites out there that you know of and that you would recommend?
Sure. Well, I guess the one that was probably the most influential for me a few years back when I was getting started in the formal project management was the PM podcast. So I know that was, for me, that was one of the first things that I found. I love listening to podcasts. And right around the time that I think you started the PM podcast, Cornelius, was about the time that I started learning about what a podcast is. And so I went out and bought an MP3 player, and your shows was one of the first ones that I downloaded and listened to. So that's definitely a good resource as well.
Thank you. And there are, of course, dozens of others now, project management related podcasts out there. There's Ron Holohan's PM 411. There is Mark Perry's PMO podcast. There is Camper Bull's, I think his is the PM War Story. So there are many, many ways out there where you can just, listen to what other project managers do and say.
Definitely. The other thing that I'd say is that if you go to PMI.org, there's the PMI Educational Foundation. They've got some good resources up there as well, especially if you're if you are a student, they've got scholarships that you can apply for in project management related areas. They've got a learning zone in there, so you can get a feel for that as well. A lot of their focus is actually on educating high school students on project management and those kind of things, but they've also got a lot of resources that are applicable for anybody who's getting into project management.
Okay. To close out our interview, let's take a look at two situations that people might be in, junior project management might be in, and I'd like to hear your recommendations of what they could do in order to respond to this. First, let's assume that one of our listeners has just been handed their first project, obviously unexpectedly, What would you say are the first 2 or maybe 3 steps that they should take in order to get this off the ground in the right direction?
Well, the first thing is to have a good cry. And then once you're done with that, well, once you're done with that, I think one of the first things that you want to do is take a look at what internal resources, project history, templates, processes, whatever it is within the organization that you get your hands on, and that includes mentors. If there are people that you can tap into that have some experience that you can tap into, that's probably the very first thing that you want to do. The second two things that I would say is that you want to formulate an approach, and then you want to produce a model of your project. So when I talk about formulating an approach, at a minimum, now there's much more that you can do. And actually, the first course in PM Student e-learning is all about the overview of the project lifespan. So this is it's kind of like a crash course in this. So if you were handed a project, that's kind of what the first course is in PM Student e-learning. But for formulating an approach, I'm talking about how will you communicate on the project, who's involved, those types of things. Where's the money and the resources coming from for the project? Who's authorizing it? And how are you going to deal with change management and quality management? Now, you could go into quite a few other things, but I would say as far as formulating an approach to how you're going to manage the project, those are probably the bare minimum, I would say. And then in terms of formulating a model of your project, what I'm really talking about there is, when you hear the words schedule, scope, budget, those types of things, and you put those down on paper and you're tracking those, that's a model of your project. So the first thing is who is involved, and this is really the who, why, when, where, what, how, and when. So who's involved? What are the stakeholders? How do they fit in? Are they users, sponsors, team members, etc.? Do they want to help your project? Do they want to hurt your project? Do they not care about your project? So that's the first thing. Why does the project exist? What are the objectives of the project, and what context is it in? So, for instance, is this a project that's already been attempted 2 or 3 times in the organization, and now you're coming in as a new project manager and trying for the 3rd or 4th time to do it? That's important to know. Where will the project work occur? So, is it distributed or co-located? And where's it actually going to be? So, you're going to have a virtual team, or is everybody going to be in the same place? What should the end state look like? And this is when you start talking about a work breakdown structure, a concept of operations. What, in the end, when you get done, what is this supposed to look like? That's an important thing. And how will that end state come about? So this is where you get into task definition, your basis of estimates, where you start fleshing out, this is how we're going to go ahead and achieve that end state. And then finally, I'd say that when will that end state come about? And when will the smaller steps towards that result happen? So this is where your milestones and your schedule come in.
All right. I think you've just given away your first course from
No,
your
I've got
e-learning.
a lot more to say, many more hours worth of information on that topic.
Right. Okay. So this was the first situation. Someone's just been handed their initial project. Those might be the lucky ones or unlucky ones, however you see this. The second situation is that one of our listeners wants to get started in project management. Maybe they are a project team member currently and they like what they see and they like project work, or maybe they are a software developer who wants to move into project management, or just somebody who's interested to get started as a PM. So what are their first, again, 2 to 3 steps to move from where they are today into being a junior project manager?
Okay. Well, I'd say the first thing that you have to do is assess where you're at right now. So what's your background? Where are you coming from? So in terms of your experience level, your educational background, your personality, why do you want to get into project management? Those are important questions to ask so that you kind of get a baseline of where you're at. The second thing would be to set some specific career goals for where you want to go. And in there, I'm talking about the industry, the project sizes that you want to work on. Do you want to work on mostly IT projects or not heavily focused IT projects? And then the third thing I'd say is just go ahead and plan a career path forward. So now that you know where you're at and what the end state is, where you want to get to, plan a path towards that. And it might be through several different positions within your organization. It might be going out to a different organization in order to achieve your career goals, but those are really the 3 steps I'd say. And then the second course in PM student e-learning is really focused on career coaching. So that's all covered in the second course.
Okay, cool. You've mentioned career coaching. You've mentioned mentoring earlier on. Let me just give a little bit of a preview here to our listeners, because you and I, we have another interview scheduled that we're going to be doing. This one here was more about how to get started in project management. And our second interview is then going to be more about mentoring, both from the side of the junior project manager, I need help, I'd like to find a mentor, as well as also from a senior project manager's perspective, where they would like to help mentor a junior PM, and we'll look at this from both angles. But for now, Josh, thank you very much for coming onto the program and talking to us on how a junior project manager can get started. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And that was our interview with Josh Nankivil on how to become a project manager. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a PM who wants to become a PMP, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the Project Management Prepcast, and study for the exam by watching over 38 hours of video training from pm-prepcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. A project manager, a software engineer, and a hardware engineer are in Miami Beach for a 2-week period helping out on a project. On their lunch break, they often go down and walk up and down the beach. During one of these walks, they stumble upon a lamp. The hardware engineer picks the lamp up and rubs it. A genie appears and says, "Well, normally I would grant 3 wishes, but since there are 3 of you, I will grant each one of you 1 wish." Since he was holding the lamp, the hardware engineer went first. "Well, I would like to spend the rest of my life in a huge house in St. Thomas with no money worries and surrounded by beautiful women who worship me." The genie granted him his wish and sent him off to St. Thomas. The software engineer went next. "I would like to spend the rest of my life living on a huge yacht cruising the Mediterranean with no money worries and surrounded by beautiful women who worship me." The genie granted him his wish too and sent him off to the Mediterranean. Last but not least, it was the project manager's turn. "And what would your wish be?" asked the genie. "Well, I want them both back after lunch," replied the project manager. Until next time.